Okay, let's dive in. Picture this. You find an old coded message, not, directions to pirate treasure, but a route, a path to the actual center of the Earth. Sounds completely wild, right?
Absolutely wild. And that's the core idea in the source material we're looking at today. We've got these excerpts, this account that reads like a firsthand story of exactly that kind of expedition. A journey that honestly feels more like, well, like something out of pure fantasy.
Right. So our mission today is to really unpack these notes. We want to pull out the key moments, the bits that make you go, wow, and, follow this incredible adventure step by step. What can we learn here about obsession, maybe, discovery, the unknown?
Exactly. It's a journey that really pushes the limits, not just physically, but also challenges the scientific thinking of its time.
And it all kicks off, according to these notes, with a professor completely lost in old books, and his nephew, who's telling the story, and who seems to just get pulled into this whole, frankly, mad scheme.
That's the setup. And the trigger, the inciting incident, is finding this runic manuscript. It was hidden inside some ancient book the professor was reading. Just a little piece of parchment falls out, covered in these strange old symbols.
Runic, okay, like Vikings and stuff.
Sort of, yeah. Old Germanic script. But here's the clever bit. The professor notices something. He figures out the writing on the parchment is newer than the book itself.
How?
Well, he spots this double M letter. Apparently that wasn't used in Icelandic until the 12th century. So the parchment is maybe 200 years younger than the book it was tucked into.
So someone hid it there later, deliberately.
Precisely. And then he connects it to the author, Árni Saknussemm, an Icelander from the 16th century. Apparently, he was persecuted for heresy. His books were burned in 1573.
Okay, so Saknussemm hid his discovery in code because people were burning his stuff.
That's the professor's deduction. This cryptograph was Saknussemm's way of saving some incredible discovery from being destroyed or suppressed.
And that's when the professor gets hooked.
Completely hooked, obsessed. He literally declares he won't eat or sleep until he cracks the code. Meanwhile, the nephew, our narrator, is just thinking, my candid opinion was that it was all rubbish. You can really feel his doubt.
Huh. I bet. But the code does get cracked, right? The notes imply that.
They do. The method isn't detailed in these bits, but yeah, the code is broken. And the secret is, well, it's the path to the Earth's center. Through the crater of the Sneffels volcano in Iceland.
Just like that. Go down a volcano.
Just like that. And the professor, naturally, decides they have to go immediately.
Oh, man. The nephew must have freaked out.
Totally horrified. But he knows his uncle. The only way to argue with him is with science, and in the professor's mind, this is the ultimate scientific quest.
So he's torn. Is his uncle a genius or just mad?
Exactly that question. Was I the victim of a madman, or was he the discoverer of rare courage?
Yep.
But despite the doubts, they start packing. Right away, dinner completely forgotten.
Wow. And there's this little bit about his cousin, Gretchen.
Yeah, it's quite telling. He shares his fears with her, maybe looking for someone to say, this is crazy. But nope, she's thrilled. Calls it magnificent, splendid. For the narrator, that's the final blow. Any hope of someone talking sense into his uncle or even just sharing his apprehension is gone. She's all for it.
So Iceland it is. They start prepping for this insane trip. And the preparations sound pretty serious.
Oh, absolutely. The list is quite something. Loads of traveling gear, obviously. But also a big medicine and surgical chest tells you what they were expecting.
Right. Not exactly packing for a spa weekend.
Definitely not. Vials of drugs, gunpowder, tinder for fires, a money belt stuffed with gold, and this thing called a Ruhmkorff coil apparatus.
Ruhmkorff coil, what's that? Sounds important.
It is hugely important. It's basically an early type of portable electric light source. Think of it like a really powerful battery-powered lantern for its day.
Ah, okay. So they can see underground without using torches.
Exactly. Which is crucial because the notes mention flammable gases later on. Torches would be, well, catastrophic.
Good thinking. What else?
6 pairs of waterproof boots? That really says something about the conditions they anticipated.
6 pairs. Okay, yeah, message received. So they leave Germany. Head for Denmark first.
That's right. Quick stops in Copenhagen. The narrator mentions climbing the steeple of the Vorfrelser's Kirk Church, which he actually remembers later when he gets vertigo.
Oh, foreshadowing.
Maybe, yeah. And he sees Kronborg Castle, but notes it's, built later than Shakespeare's Hamlet. Little details like that. He also mentions seeing galley slaves, which is a pretty stark image.
Then they get on a ship.
Yep, the Valkyrie, heading for Iceland. The narrator describes the cabin as pretty basic, adding dryly that in the cause of science, men are expected to suffer.
Sets the tone, doesn't it?
It really does. As they get closer to Iceland, the scenery gets wilder. Cape Portland, huge granite cliffs. Mount Myrtle's yokel. They see whales, sharks, Pass Islands, or round Cape Reykjanes. You get a real sense of approaching a remote, powerful place.
And then finally, Reykjavik.
Reykjavik. They meet the mayor, and importantly, a Professor Fredrickson, who's a natural science guy there.
Does he help them?
Well, his invaluable ability, as the notes put it, is that he speaks Icelandic and Latin. The narrator knows Latin.
Ah, so they can actually communicate, like scholars do?
Exactly. Using the language of Horace, no less, bridges that gap.
What are the narrator's first thoughts about Reykjavik?
He finds it quite somber, sad even. No trees, stark volcanic peaks all around. The houses are made of turf, grass roofs they actually cut for hay. It sounds very harsh.
And the people.
He sees them as strong but thoughtful, maybe a bit melancholy. He has this interesting reflection, calls them exiles of a higher scale, maybe unhappier than indigenous Arctic people because they have like higher awareness but are stuck living in this tough environment.
That's quite a thought. Does the professor ask about Saknussemm there?
Oh, absolutely. Straight away, he asks Professor Fredrickson.
And what does Fredrickson say?
He confirms everything. Saknussemm was brilliant, illustrious above all, but yes, his works were burned in Copenhagen for heresy back in 1573. It validates the professor's whole theory about the coded message.
Okay, so before they head for the volcano, they need a guide, right?
They do, and they find Hans, introduced as silent, extraordinary, incredibly calm and efficient. The narrator seems impressed right off the bat.
So the team is assembled, professor, nephew, Hans, and they set off for Sneffels.
Yep, leaving Reykjavik. They head into the southwest region. Hans sets this incredibly steady, fast pace. The horses apparently just follow along.
And narrator's probably exhausted already.
You get that sense. He contrasts his own fatigue with Hans and his uncle. Notes that his uncle seems to think it's actually impossible for him to become fatigued.
Huh, right. What's the journey like?
They pass tiny settlements. Hans barely says a word. They ride along the coast, cross this fjord, the Aval Fjord, half a mile wide. The narrator admits being really scared riding a horse through rough water.
I don't blame him.
Then the landscape gets boggy, marshy, mountains looking like fortifications, and they have this quite sad encounter. They see lepers.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, called spittelsk. The notes say it was a common hereditary issue in Iceland then, and marriage was banned for them. It's described as a really lonely, desolate scene, dying plants, stunted trees. The narrator feels really down, starts longing for home.
You can feel the mood shift. But then they see the volcano.
Yeah, they skirt Faxe Bay, and there it is, the twin white peaks of Sneffels less than 5 miles off. Even the horses pick up speed, but the narrator is just bone-tired, unlike his uncle and Hans, who seem tireless.
They finally reach the base near a place called Stabby.
Right, and here the geology is just incredible. Huge basalt columns, hexagonal pillars formed by cooling lava. Some are vertical, 30 feet high, holding up horizontal layers like a roof over the sea.
Like the Giant's Causeway.
Exactly. The narrator makes that comparison. And to Fingal's Cave, too. It looks like ancient ruins, temples built by nature, waves crashing through openings in the rock. Really dramatic stuff.
Do they meet anyone helpful there?
Nope. They meet the local priest, but the narrator dismisses him as basically a dull peasant, not the scholar the professor hoped for. So the professor just decides, right, let's get going, up the mountain, no more delays.
Okay, so they're leaving the coast, heading inland towards the volcano proper, through all that basalt and volcanic rock.
And this is where the narrator has his big moment of doubt. Like serious scientific doubt.
Ah, the heat thing.
Exactly. Looking at all this volcanic evidence, Iceland itself, born from eruptions, he becomes absolutely convinced the Earth's core must be molten fire. It's just logical based on what he sees. Subterranean heat has to increase with depth, right?
Makes sense from a volcano perspective.
Right. So this whole idea of a passage to the center, it directly contradicts his understanding. He even mentions it goes against thinkers like Sir Humphrey Davy.
Didn't he have theories about the core maybe not being uniformly molten or even solidifying?
Well, the source just says the narrator thinks Saknussemm contradicts Davy, implying Davy might have allowed for possibilities other than a simple liquid fire core. But for the narrator, seeing the volcanoes, it's simple. Davy must be wrong, his uncle's wrong, Saknussemm's wrong. If his theory holds, he thinks all must end in smoke. It's a dead end.
Wow. So he's climbing this volcano, believing the goal is fundamentally impossible, even suicidal.
Pretty much. But the ascent begins anyway. Hans leads the way up the back of the crater. The narrator's tired, physically and mentally.
And then they nearly get wiped out.
Almost immediately, Hans suddenly stops them. Just in time, a huge sand whirlwind comes tearing down the slope right where they would have been. It's throwing massive rocks around.
Jeez. Close call. Hans sounds invaluable.
Absolutely. His caution saved them there. But the climb itself is brutal. 5 hours to go up just 1,500 feet vertically because the path winds back and forth for miles, 3 leagues, the notes say.
And the narrator is suffering.
Oh, yeah. He lists it all. Exhaustion, hunger, cold, the thin air making it hard to breathe. Just miserable.
But they make it to the top of the crater.
By midday, yes. Utterly spent. They reach the summit. He looks up at this small patch of sky visible through the top opening and has this moment, wondering if he'll ever see the sky again.
Heavy. And this is it, the entrance.
This is the mouth of the central shaft, supposedly. It's big, 100 feet across. The narrator peers down, and bam! Vertigo hits him hard.
Oh, no.
He feels this weird pull, like the abyss is sucking him in. Hans has to grab him, pull him back. And that's when he remembers practicing looking down from that church steeple in Copenhagen, but it was nothing like this.
So the descent actually begins. Down the rope.
Down the rope, into the darkness. The narrator is just focused on not falling, basically. He's not really paying attention to the rock layers they're passing, Carboniferous, Silurian, primitive stuff.
But the professor's loving it a bit.
Oh, absolutely. For him, it's like reading the Earth's history book, page by page. A unique geological field trip. Silurian, that's what, hundreds of millions of years old?
Okay.
And primitive soil, meaning the base rock. Granite, maybe.
Right. How do they see down there? They must be pitch black.
That's where the Ruhmkorff coil comes in, their electric lantern. The notes call the light magical, like an artificial day, and crucially, safe, no open flame to ignite any potential gases.
Smart. Is it a straight drop?
Not entirely. It becomes these steeply sloping tunnels, inclined planes. They have to use cracks in the rock-like steps. Really careful work. They lower the luggage down with ropes. Slow going.
It's been some strange sights down there, though.
Definitely. The electric light reveals amazing cave formations, stalactites hanging down, weird porous lava that looks like blisters, quartz crystals sparkling everywhere like chandeliers. The narrator gets a bit poetic, compares it to genie lighting up underground palaces.
Wow. But then things get frustrating.
Yeah, the path levels out. It becomes horizontal for a while.
Which would annoy the professor.
Massively. He wants to go down, towards the center, not sideways. They pass through an area that reminds the narrator of a coal mine, and again, the mention of flammable gas comes up. Thank goodness for that electric light.
And then the big crisis hits.
Water. They run out, or get desperately low. The narrator describes becoming incredibly thirsty, throat parched, can barely talk. He basically says, that's it, we have to turn back. Game over.
How does the professor react? He can't want to quit.
He struggles, avoids looking at the narrator. You can tell admitting defeat is killing him. But, they're dying of thirst. So he finally agrees, okay, let's look for water together. He acknowledges their lives are on the line.
But still, the narrator notes his uncle's superhuman energy. Even then.
Yeah, even facing failure, the professor's drive is immense. The narrator kind of gives in to that force of will.
Do they find water?
Amazingly, yes. They find this little trickle in a stream bed. They follow it. They even name it Hansbach after Hans.
Nice touch.
And the effect is immediate. The narrator drinks, feels totally revived, like a new man. Suddenly, he's all for continuing the journey again.
Funny what a bit of water can do. So, back to descending.
Back to descending. They find another tunnel heading down. They keep observing the geology passing through primitive soil, the base granite layer. The uncle's still thrilled from a mineralogy perspective.
How deep are they now?
The uncle does some calculations. He figures they're about 35 leagues down. That's over 100 miles below the surface. And geographically, southeast of the Sneffels volcano.
100 miles? That's insane. What's above them?
The Atlantic Ocean. Miles of it. The narrator starts thinking about storms raging up there, maybe whales hitting the seafloor, which is basically their roof. This adamantine prison, he calls it.
Is the professor worried the ocean might break through?
Nope. He just dismisses the idea. Too confident in the Earth's crust, I guess.
What about the pressure? Air pressure must be immense.
You check the manometer, that's the pressure gauge. It shows it's hot. Yeah. But the uncle suggests they're actually adapting to it because they've come down relatively slowly. Like deep sea divers acclimatizing, maybe?
A grim kind of adaptation. And Hans, how's he handling all this?
Hans is just. Hans. The narrator keeps praising his marvelous coolness, his incomprehensible sang-froid, just calmly navigating these incredibly dangerous descents. He totally relies on Hans.
Until the narrator gets separated.
Yes. Nightmare scenario. He somehow gets lost from the others. Suddenly he's alone in total, absolute darkness.
Absolute obscurity made me blind, he says. Panic sets in. He feels like he's going mad, runs wildly, falls, hurts himself. Utter despair.
Oh, God. How does he get found?
He starts hearing faint voices. He realizes the sound is traveling strangely in the tunnels. He follows the sound until it's loudest, like finding a focal point, and then he hears a word clearly. Forlored.
Which means?
Lost. Yeah. In Icelandic. It's them.
Wow, so the tunnel acoustics saved him.
Pretty much. It allows them to communicate. He shouts back. The uncle is hugely relieved, thought he was gone for good.
Yeah.
They even figure out how to estimate the distance between them using a watch and the speed of sound like they did before.
Clever, like sonar. Sort of, yeah, using the echo delay. And eventually, they find him. The uncle actually shows some rare emotion, cries out, "You are saved!" Even Hans's eyes apparently beam with satisfaction. A big moment.
And where do they emerge after all that?
Into something impossible. A gigantic cavern. So huge it contains an entire ocean. The Central Sea.
An ocean. Underground.
An underground ocean. And the lighting is bizarre. It's electric like the Northern Lights, but constant, steady, and giving off no heat. It fills the whole vault above.
What does it look like?
The description is amazing. This tremendous vault overhead is like a sky made of shifting vapors and clouds. Light and shadow play across it from these silent electrical discharges. The scale is just mind-boggling, hard to describe. He says he needs new words for it, like being on another planet.
Incredible. What about the shores of this sea?
Equally strange, they find a forest, but it's made of giant mushrooms, some 40 feet tall. So big, they block out the light underneath, creating this gloomy, mystical feel.
Giant mushrooms, okay? And Hans just says,
only a forest of mushrooms. Typical Hans. Understated.
Huh. Is there life in this sea?
There is. Hans goes fishing, and he catches something amazing. A fish. But it's completely blind, and it has no fins or tail.
Whoa. Adapted to total darkness.
Exactly. A huge scientific find for the time. Creatures evolving without sight in a place with no light. The professor is ecstatic.
And seeing this, it gets the narrator thinking.
It does. His imagination goes wild. He starts picturing prehistoric monsters in the water, on the shores, giant turtles, creatures called Leptotherium, Mesogotherium, things from before humans existed. He's struck by the immense age of this hidden world.
The professor.
Uh-huh.
He's probably getting restless again.
You guessed it. He's scanning the horizon, annoyed the sea is way bigger than he thought. They've sailed way past his initial estimate. He calls the whole sea voyage a party of pleasure, calls the ocean a pond. He just wants to go down.
Always down. Do they notice anything else weird scientifically?
Yes. Another anomaly. The compass. The magnetic needle isn't dipping towards the pole like it should in the northern hemisphere. Instead, it's tilting upwards.
Upwards. That's backward.
Completely backwards, according to the science of the day. But the professor, again, doesn't see it as a failure of science. He sees it as a new fact, a stepping stone to truth. Evidence that maybe the old theories about magnetism deep underground were wrong. It's how science progresses, right? By finding things that don't fit.
Fascinating. So they need to cross this sea. How?
Hans builds a raft, uses some kind of wood they find nearby, maybe petrified timber from those mushroom forests. It's about 10 feet by 5 feet, pretty basic, but they launch it onto the Central Sea.
And the voyage begins. Is it smooth sailing?
Not exactly. They witness an absolutely epic battle between two huge sea monsters.
Seriously? Like what?
An ichthyosaurus described as part lizard, part whale, and a plesiosaurus. That's the one with the super long serpent neck, rising 30 feet out of the water, and a body like a giant turtle shell. The fight sounds terrifying, phantasmagoric.
Wow. Okay, that's not boring. What happens after that?
After the monster fight, yeah, things calm down. The journey gets a bit monotonous, but they notice the temperature is rising, and there's this distant, continuous roaring sound like thunder or a waterfall.
Getting closer to something.
Seems like it. They see something ahead, think it's another monster at first, but it's an island, and on the island, a geyser.
A geyser, like in Iceland.
Exactly. Geyser means fury in Icelandic. It's shooting a massive jet of hot water high into the cavern with deep rumbles from below. The electric light shining through the spray creates rainbows. It's majestic.
Hot water, though. Doesn't that mess with the narrator's heat theories again?
Good point. He notes that. Finding hot water relatively near the surface of this underground world seems odd if all the heat is supposed to be deep, deep down at the core. Another observation challenging the assumptions.
Things seem to be heating up, literally, and then
Yeah.
a storm.
A massive electrical storm hits them out on the sea. Suddenly, this ball of fire explodes, engulfs the raft in cascades of living fire, then total darkness. The electricity affects them physically. The notes say the uncle and Hans were spitting fire.
Whoa, like static discharge.
Sounds like it, but intense. The raft is just thrown around by the waves in a powerful current. They lose control completely.
What happens to them?
They eventually wake up, washed ashore somewhere. The storm wrecked them. Most of their remaining gear, food, instruments gone. Just a bit of dried meat and the manometer survived. They're in a really bad spot.
And where are they? Did they cross the sea?
That's the devastating part. They realize the wind and the current during the storm pushed them right back to where they started.
No. All that way, the monsters, the geyser, the storm, for nothing.
Back to square one on the sea voyage. Utterly demoralizing.
How does the professor take that?
Badly. Astonishment, disbelief, then pure rage. The narrator tries to reason with him, but he won't listen. His only thought is, get back on the raft, try again immediately. Fixated.
Meanwhile, the narrator's probably trying to figure out what just happened.
Yeah, he's theorizing about the sea itself. Maybe water seeped down from the real ocean through cracks ages ago, and the heat below vaporizes it, creating the clouds, the humidity, and maybe even the electricity for the storms, trying to make scientific sense of the madness.
So, stuck back on the original shore.
Yeah.
What do they find there?
They start exploring this coast again, and they find these incredible fossil beds. Miles of them. Lofty burrows, the notes call them, packed with prehistoric bones. They're literally crushing fossils underfoot. An unbelievable collection.
Any specific finds?
One huge one. The uncle finds a human skull among the fossils.
A human skull down there.
Yes. And he identifies it as belonging to a human from the Quaternary period, basically very early prehistoric human. This was a massive deal back then, finding fossil evidence of humans that ancient challenged everything, especially religious timelines. It wasn't like finding mythological giant bones. This was presented as real proof.
Wow. Okay, that changes things. What else is on this shore?
They walk into this forest, but it's completely bizarre. Gigantic trees, but species from all over the world mixed together, oaks next to palms, eucalyptus next to pines. A botanist's nightmare, the narrator calls it, defies classification. And he starts getting scared they might run into giant prehistoric mammals.
And do they?
They see something huge, maybe a giant ape, maybe even a person, taller than anything known. The narrator can hardly believe it's a living human down there. They don't stick around to find out, they run.
Smart move.
Yeah.
But then they find something else. Man-made.
Yes. On the sand, near where they saw the giant being, they find a dagger. Rusty, steel, but of a singular shape. The narrator notes it's good quality steel, not primitive.
Whose dagger? The giant's.
Or maybe Saknussemm's. The professor recognizes it, not the dagger itself, but as a clue. He looks around and finds initials carved into the rock nearby. A.S.
Arn Saknussem, he was here.
Exactly. Saknussem didn't just find the passage. He came this way. He left markers. A trail.
That must have re-energized the professor like nothing else.
Totally. Feverish excitement. He sees Saknussem as this genius guide showing them the path. He's determined now more than ever. He declares he'll follow the trail and carve his name at the center of the earth.
So there's a new way down, near the dagger.
Seems so. They find another gallery, another tunnel entrance, right near where the dagger and the initials were. The professor sees it as fate. Circumstances seem to be helping them. New plan. Descend this new shaft.
How do they know how deep it is?
The professor has an idea. He asks the narrator to drop a lantern down it. Use the sound delay again, time the fall, calculate the depth, just like when they found him earlier.
Okay, so the narrator drops the lantern.
And all hell breaks loose. The moment the lantern goes down, the ground beneath the raft, they must have dried it near the opening, gives way. There's a massive roar of water. It seems dropping the lantern triggered a collapse or maybe hit something. The source isn't perfectly clear if it was the impact or something else, but the result is violent.
What happens?
They're plunged downwards. Not falling, but swept away by an irresistible torrent of water and what the notes call eruptive matter.
Oh my God, like being flushed down a drain pipe.
A volcanic drain pipe. And in the chaos, the last tiny bit of food they had is lost. It looks utterly hopeless. The narrator feels doomed.
What does the professor say now? Still hopeful.
Amazingly, yes. While there is life, there is hope, he says. He suggests eating the last morsel before the narrator tells him it's gone. That silences him for a moment.
So, trapped in a torrent, heading down, no food. What's the escape plan?
The professor, incredibly calm now, states the only possible chance they have, the ultimate, most insane long shot. Get carried up by a volcanic eruption, be cast upon Mother Earth once more through the gaping crater of a volcano.
Ride an eruption out.
That's the only hope he sees, and then, unbelievably, they see it happening. Right above them, the shaft becomes a volcanic chimney. Jets of flame, pumice stones, ash, lava shooting past them, upwards. They're in an active volcanic vent being carried up with the erupting material.
This is unbelievable.
The description is intense. Feeling the earth shake, loud explosions floating upwards on this river of eruptive matter.
And the last moments in these excerpts.
It echoes the storm again. A burst of fire being covered in light and flames, then darkness. The uncle and Hans spitting fire from the electricity again, and the narrator's final recorded question, "Whither are we going?" Just hanging there as they're blasted upwards.
Wow. Just wow. But the later chapter titles mentioned in the source, Volcanic Shaft, Daylight at Last, Journey Ended, they suggest.
They strongly suggest that this absolutely insane escape route actually worked, that they were indeed ejected back on the surface of the Earth alive, likely somewhere completely unexpected, but back in the daylight.
What an incredible story these notes tell. From finding a coded message to literally being shot out of a volcano.
It's extraordinary, and it really highlights that tension between scientific theory and just raw observation, doesn't it? The narrator thinks the core is molten, but they find hot geysers near the surface down there. The compass goes haywire, but the professor sees it as data, a stepping stone to truth.
Yeah, it shows how science has to adapt to what you actually find, not just stick to the old books.
Exactly, and you see the power of sheer obsession in the professor, pushing them forward against all odds, contrasted with the quiet, essential competence of Hans, the guide who keeps them alive.
And the wonders they supposedly saw. The underground ocean, the giant mushrooms, the blind fish, the sea monsters. It taps into that sense of mystery, what might still be hidden.
Absolutely. Prehistoric life, maybe even ancient humans.
Mm-hmm.
It's a reminder of how much we don't know about our own planet, even now.
Plus, the sheer randomness of exploration. Getting lost, the storm pushing them back, the final explosive ascent. You just can't predict it all.
Definitely not. This whole deep dive looking at these excerpts, it shows that sometimes the wildest ideas, the most audacious journeys, lead to the most unexpected and sometimes terrifying discoveries.
It really makes you think. If you take this account, even as fiction, and consider everything they supposedly found, that hidden world, the ancient life, Saknussemm's centuries-old trail, what other unbelievable secrets might our world still hold? Deep down, hidden away, just waiting for someone bold enough or maybe crazy enough to look.